early idea that I heard around movement of feet, knees, hips. That's how movement can be initiated. It starts from your toe, and you're pulling with your toe, and then your knees start kind of moving through in that direction, and then your hips flick up, and then I guess that the next thing along the chain is your chest coming through, and oftentimes your hand just follows. Like the amount of times with a hard movement that I just don't think about trying to get my hand there, and I just try and get my body in space there. Like it's I don't know if people have like played with that before, but it is one of the biggest unlocks for hard climbing movement.
Tom O'Halloran, welcome to the Testpiece podcast, man. How are you doing?
Yeah, good man. Lovely sunny morning here in Australia. Great to come on and just chat a bit of Aussie climbing froth and yeah, have a chat with you as well.
Tom, morning. It's definitely not morning for me. It's classic that you're coming from Australia. You're the first guest I've had all the way from Australia. So yeah, thanks for waking up early and hopping on with me. And you also just said froth, and I was like, I spent this whole morning watching your videos. I was thinking like I'm trying to get frothed up for this talk, or I don't know how to properly use froth. Can you explain froth to me?
I'm not even sure actually. It's probably just one of those words that like it just needs to naturally come out and it just fits into the situation. Um, but I guess it's probably synonymous with excitement or something like that, but just a bit more frothy.
Hmm. I think it might be an Australian thing. I don't think I'd ever heard of it until speaking with you, but I kind of like it. And I also like just, when you travel and you get those different encouragements, like there's of course there's Ale, there's
Yeah.
Venga. I think I've heard like Jayo and China Gamba. My buddy from Sweden says something like Komayan or something. And I don't know. Do you guys do
Kumian.
anything? Komian. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Good
I
job,
think,
dude.
yeah, I heard that in Rocklands for the first time. I was like, that's a sick one.
Anything special in Australia? Or yeah, and is froth? You can't use froth like that. You don't say like,
No.
"Hey, get all frothed up there." Yeah.
No, I'm not sure. One I like to kind of throw out there every now and then is giving it a bit of kangaroo curry. Uh, we're a fairly
Mm.
multicultural kind of thing, and we eat our Australian national animal. So, yeah. No, I think, come on, come on. It's just like a real heavy accent to it, probably. But yeah, it is funny. Like I went to Sayus in, this particular time was 2015, and it's just funny. Even we speak the same language, the Americans and Australians, and it's just those little references. Like a friend and I were like, "Oh, we're going to go into town, into Gap, and we're going to go to the bottle shop. Do you guys want anything?" And the Americans are like, "Oh, what? Like, do you need a water bottle? Like, we've got a water bottle." And you're like, "No, no, no. Like, going to the bottle shop. Like, do you want some beer or something? Because that's just we call it the bottle shop." And yeah, like the things that you just didn't really realize were the yeah. There's that quote of if a lion could speak our language, we wouldn't understand them. And it's like, yeah, it's just like all those little references and
Well, one thing that I actually really like about the English language is that sometimes we will take words from other languages and not even mess with them. Like I always think of je ne sais quoi or something like that, where it's just like it becomes a word we use that's not English. So, well, I really like the kangaroo curry. I don't think I can appropriately say that when I'm here in America, but I look forward to traveling to Australia and hearing you yell that at me. Give it a little kangaroo. That's classic. Uh, yeah. So Tom, you're out of Australia. Like I said, you're the first. I think you might be one of the first climbers I've talked to from Australia. Actually, I take it back. I knew this guy Wiz, but anyways, I don't want to go
he was
down.
Kiwi.
Oh, he's a Kiwi. Oh, how
Yeah.
embarrassing. Okay. Uh, Tom, you are arguably the top climber in Australia. You've competed in the Olympics. You've climbed 515, even F8 up to V14. and I could definitely convert these to the French grading system, but just like I didn't know what frothing is, I don't think I could convert it to the Australian climbing metric. Yeah, how would you do that?
Yeah, I actually thought I might do a little table for us as well. You know, Fahrenheit, Celsius, and miles, kilometers, and all that sort of thing. Yeah,
Need the help.
V14 to V14. 515 is 36 in Australia. So we use the Eubank system, and it's just like starts at 1 and goes up to, well, 39 is, what's that, like 515C or something at the moment. But I like to use 14A is 32. So throughout, if I kind of jump around, if people have got that as like their little sort of benchmark, 14A, 32, 8, 8B plus.
Yeah, it sounds really reasonable to start at one and then go up. I'm just going to say that's a very reasonable way to grade.
Yeah.
Uh, well, Tom, I mean, those achievements are amazing, put you in elite level. And of course, I would be excited to talk to you just because of that. But honestly, man, the main reason I reached out to you to come on the pod is just because of your YouTube content, man. It's just really freaking good. And I mean, I make content. I have my, I watch a lot of climbing content, and I just feel like your YouTube videos, they like strike some balance between learning how to climb really well, but also the role that training plays into there, and that's like this nuanced topic that I feel like we're always trying to get to the bottom of, and that's really difficult to communicate. But you also just have this honesty and realness, and I think you're helping a lot of people out there, and I feel like we're on the same wavelength. So yeah, just psyched to chat with you about all the things that are in there.
Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, it's been the YouTube stuff's been really fun. It had been something that I'd wanted to do for a really long time, uh, and like it literally just comes from this space of like I watch people all the time at the cliff or at the climbing gym and all that, and just like just making these simple mistakes, and you're like, I see this happen all the time, and you know, if I could just like share the experiences that I've had, I'm not going to pretend that I know everything. Absolutely, there's millions of people out there that know more than me about climbing. Maybe not millions. Maybe there's only a million people climbing. Um, but yeah, it's just like it's a fun opportunity to like at scale try and just share a little bit of knowledge and stuff. And I try and break it down to being as simple and practical as possible, because I think so much of that information out there is um, quite nuanced and hard. And like I've tried some of those like silly things of like do this and then this and then this and then you've got to like this much weight and blah blah blah, and it just doesn't work. And it's like I want to try and boil it down to like what fits into a normal person's life. Like I'm a father of a 10-year-old daughter. I work. I've got a partner. Like we've got two dogs. You know, life's busy, and it's like I want to get the most out of my climbing and still be a normal person. So that's what I try and boil down a little bit in those videos.
Well, I think the reason why I like them so much is there's this temptation to really head to these really black and white ends of the spectrum where it's just something like this is this is how you do a drop knee. It's like really basic, dumbed down, and it's almost like, yeah, like great, you explained to me the most fundamental mechanic. And I know we could actually go super deep into what makes a good drop knee, but then you also see like some other end of the spectrum of just saying, hey, do a bunch of hangboarding and here's the sets and reps. And it's just so tempting to get sucked into these black and white things. And I'm not saying that those don't have value, but someone like you who has been climbing forever at such a high level, you know a lot more than those basics, but it's hard to communicate that. And I just think you do a great job of bringing that reality, being honest, and yeah, doing it. So thanks, man. Love that you do that.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think one of the things that I like to try and have in there is like this concept of hiding the vegetables, of just like, you know, here's a video about this, and I want to try and share some of the things that are going through my head as I'm like having a projecting session on the tension board 2 in my garage, or um, you know, out at the boulders, and these are the things that are running through my mind as I'm projecting, and also like these are the lessons that I've learned from bouldering, and like people think it's all about strength and power, but actually I think it's like this incredible opportunity to boil down sequences, but also to practice being in a performance mindset, like that. You just, I think that's a massive win for sport climbers. Like, you go bouldering, and what you get is actually like so many more opportunities to be at the base of a climb and go, this is going to be it. I'm going to bring it all together. Bring yourself into that headspace and go for it. And you get like heaps of opportunities of that in a day if you go bouldering rather than sport climbing. It's like, a good day sport climbing, you might tie in for 3 red points, and you deal with the nerves and all that. So yeah, it's just like it's fun sharing it. So yeah.
Geez, 3 red points. I don't even know. I feel like I get 1, maybe 2. Maybe it's because I spend too much time bouldering. I gotta tell you, I've been, like I said, I've been watching all your videos, and I really appreciate that you put up a TB2, tension board, or really if it had been any standardized board. I appreciate that because when I see you on your spray wall, I mean, it's still cool and you're explaining those lessons, but I think there's something really nice about being able to then see the way you do a sequence, see what you were focusing on, see what you were talking about, and try it myself. So just +1 to that new addition to your to your garage.
Oh man, the garage is like, so we bought our new house just over 12 months ago. Um, and the like one of the biggest selling points was the garage. Like, we had a nice little under the house kind of area, like a basement type thing at the old place, and had enough room for a 3 meter wide spray board, woody, and it's probably like 2.5 meters high, like ceiling height, and then it was at 45 degrees. So that gave you, um, what's it, like 10 foot wide by nearly 9 foot of climbing surface. Um, and then yeah, this new place had a like 5.5 meter wide garage, so I can't quickly do that. Like 15 feet, I guess. Um, yeah, it's rad. It's so good to have that space, and just like the garage, it's a double car space, and it's just all climbing. So yeah, my partner and I, like, we open the roller door and we look at the 2 walls there, and you're just like, how did this happen?
Mm. Careful planning, and when you go and you shop for houses, bring the tape measure for the garage. We had
Yeah,
our realtor represented a bunch of us. A bunch of my friends moved from San Francisco Bay Area up to the mountains, like the Tahoe area, and we all ended up with the same realtor. And she would make fun of us because like we would just go into the garage and measure. Okay, 11 feet. Like, is this going to fit a moon bore? Like, just we all had
yeah,
our requirements, and yeah, it was a necessary check mark. So I get it.
yeah,
I get it.
totally. Yeah. Yeah, you're looking up in the ceiling space to see like what's structural, what can be taken out. Can I get the 12-foot board rather than just the 10 foot?
I feel that the struggle is real. Uh, Tom, I'm going to try to start this podcast a touch different. Well, we already started, but I'm going to try to start it a little bit different before we hop right in. This podcast is typically about how you go from good to great. And I think it was really clear with your short intro that you made that leap. And so I wanted to start out by asking you how to go from good to great.
Yeah, there's so many different avenues, and there's a million things that people can go at. We're just saying, that you could do your fingerboarding, you can do all this sort of stuff, and it's all a bit overwhelming. But for me, I think the whole concept kind of boils down to just taking it a little bit seriously. And there's definitely a sliding spectrum of what serious means to some people. Serious for some people might mean that they have like 6 beers the night before they go climbing rather than 10, and that's them taking it seriously, which to me is probably, not what I would recommend. And then there's the Adam Ondra rolling around on the floor, with, his physio being a piece of rock so he can climb on rest days. That to me is probably a little bit too serious. But I just think that it's I'm going to give everyone permission here, in case they're asking for it, to just take it a little bit more seriously. Like, to take their time at the cliff to try and find a bit of a headspace, because it means so much to us. Like, we disrupt our weekends, we disrupt our week to go to the climbing gym and to try and get a little bit better at this sport that we love. And we go out on the weekend and, the washing piles up in the laundry because we didn't have time to fold it, because we've been out at the cliff with our friends trying to climb these things and have those connections. And it means a lot. And we pull on and we do our best. But I just see so many people, not feeling like they should take it seriously because they're not climbing hard enough. And, I've definitely felt that. And you watch videos of, the best guys in the world, best girls in the world, sanding down their fingers and doing all this sort of stuff. And you're like, oh man, it's like, you've got to be climbing V15 before you start sanding your fingers. And then I realized, like, actually what's happening is them just getting rid of the daggy bits of skin that on the next time you pull on is just going to peel back and then make it even worse. And you're like, oh, I should probably just take care of that and do it. But there's just little things that we can all do. Like I went climbing with my dad the other week. He's a climber as well. Started, I think, 2 weeks after me, and he's climbed up to 7B plus, which is like what, mid 512s.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, and so he hasn't been climbing for a little bit, but we're out, and he's always wanted to do this route in the Blue Mountains called These People Are Sandwiches. And he's always been like, this has always had my number. And it's a relatively easy one. But there's just this little kind of crux move. And he went up there the first time on lead and he's like, oh, yeah, cool. Okay. He's like half sorted it out. And then, fell off a couple of times, did the sequence, went to the top. And as I'm lowering him back down, it's like, sweet, that looked awesome. You should just give that crux sequence another go just to like fully work it out, and you'll do it next go. Like it's like a 2-move kind of thing that you come up into this side pull, walk your feet up into the right spot, and lerp out to like a good sort of juggy edge. And he's like, I'm not good enough to take it that seriously. Just, it's all right. And it's like, no, like, you've come down on multiple trips to see us because they live 1,000 kilometers north of us, in Brisbane. And it's like, you've come down on multiple trips and wanted to do this climb. And this is the first opportunity that you've had to get on it. You could totally do it. And you've just given up that because you don't feel like you'll be taking it too seriously if you put yourself in a position to win. And obviously he went up on his second go. He's stuffed up because he couldn't quite remember his feet. And then he's too cooked to have a third go. And it's like, come on. Like, it was that easy. You just like jump on it and just give it a go. And I think, it's super simple to do those little things, like to just take your time to warm up properly. Like a big thing for me is you don't need to tick your warm up. Like you need to have done your warm up, but I see so many people like get a flash pump because they try and climb their warm up routes in one go, and then they're flash pumped, and it's like it's okay. Like you're warming up, just sit on the bolt and chill, and like do your warm up properly. You don't need to like flash pump yourself or whatever, and make sure you're keeping your hands nice and warm between attempts in the colder temperatures. Like make sure your fingers are recruited before you pull on, because there's just all these really simple little things that people kind of miss out on, because they're maybe afraid of that they might be seen to be taking it too seriously.
I mean, what's funny is that warm up example is actually a similar symptom where people want to do the warm up, like they don't want to, it should be easy for them. But then if, they chose a grade that was a little bit too much, then they'll work too hard just to do the warm, which isn't even something they care about. And it's almost a similar symptom. And it makes me think of, I mean, I think we both started climbing long enough ago where training was a bit taboo. Trying hard was a bit taboo. There was just this style of, it was almost just, could you just do it, or did you have to go? I'm saying it wrong because it's hard to describe the ethos of, it wasn't cool to train. It was cool to just do it. And I remember when Adam Ondra came around, I was actually I hate to say it because it's embarrassing now, but I didn't like Adamondra's style because he would yell, and I would think, "Oh, look at this guy! He's screaming. He's making such a big fuss, and who cares?" But he was just trying really hard, and then that thing you're talking about, that video where he was mimicking the moves on silence. Yeah, he was taking it super seriously, and he's always taking it super seriously. And now I admire that, and I just think, wow, like what kind of person was I that was thinking less of someone who was taking their sport really seriously. So yeah, good call outs there, man.
Yeah, I think that it's if you're the sort of person that likes to try and stay a little bit kind of more quiet at the cliff, like you maybe don't feel as confident to take space at the cliff. Um, it's obviously then quite hard, and you can feel like all of the eyes are on you if you were to um, take a moment to just sit underneath the climb, or just sit over with your bags before you pull on for a red point, and just like close your eyes and just chill out for a moment. Like I've done that a couple of times on routes, and it's amazing how much it just like it makes a massive impact on me to feeling good to kind of get into a headspace. But I've seen other people do it, and you're like, oh, cool, yep, like they're just doing their thing, and it can feel like you are going to be taking it too seriously. Like I was at the cliff and I was trying this route. It's the hardest climate at the crag, and I was worried that people would think, oh, like what the hell's Tom doing over there? But it's just like when I see it, someone else doing it, you're like, oh, cool, good one. Like they've actually, I have respect because that they've worked out how to get the best out of themselves. Like they feel confident to take space, and it's not taking space like from anyone else. It's taking their own space in the world and owning that. And I think it's like super special. And you can just try it in those just little bits. Like we don't all end up needing to go from like not taking it seriously to rolling around at the crag, mimicking our crux sequences, but just those little things. Like just go, there's probably in most people a little niggle in the back of their head that, "Oh, I should just do my warm up a little bit better. I should just do this. I shouldn't probably be doing this." And I think it's just a matter of listening to that. And yeah, as you say, like that attitude towards training was super funny. Like I totally grew up in that era. So I started climbing in 2004, and there was definitely that era of you you don't train, or at least in the space that I grew up in. I think I was far enough away from that sort of Ben and Jerry sort of cellar training space that those guys were hardcore training, and then it kind of came through with the Dave Graham and Chris Sharma era. They're my idols, and they don't train, they just go climbing. And like I remember sitting around in like watching conversations of people that I looked up to, and them saying like, this person in our community, their climbing achievements don't count. Like he literally said it doesn't count because they train. And that was like I've told that story to people in the past, and they just can't wrap their head around it. But it was like that's what I grew up in, and it was such I fully was drinking that. Like, yeah, nah, it's like it's what you can naturally do that counts. And 100%, it's like there's natural talent, and that's cool to see, but it's also like a waste if that's the case. And it also just like doesn't matter, because for some people they really love training, and that's their thing, and they get to explore their potential, and they get to do more climbing because they're fitter and stronger and more robust. And it's just like, yeah, it's been super cool to see that transition come across to people training. And um, yeah, we've obviously seen a massive increase in how strong like so many people are from that.
So Tom, I do want to ask you exactly what what happened when you started taking it seriously and what that looked like. But I want to I want to touch one more time on this advice of people taking it seriously, because I want to put ourselves into the shoes of someone at the crag who they sit down, they have their moment, maybe they warmed up extra long and people were like, come on, like, what do you care? Get on it. And then I know that I would have this fear of like, I'm going to slip on the first bolt and everyone's going to be like, hey, like, look at you, you suck. It doesn't matter what you do. Or you yell at the crux move, everyone looks at you and then you fall. And it was just, the crag warm up. And, what do you say to people who, or what do you say to me who I can't help but feel like by taking it seriously, all the eyes are on me, and then if I fail, I'm going to look like a chuffer.
Yeah, 100%. I can fully see that and feel it. I've definitely felt that stuff before, uh, and it's not fun. But most of the time, like if you were to see someone doing that yourself, I think most people would be like, "Oh, cool." And I think that like the screaming thing is one thing. Um, I'm a huge fan of watching someone like really fight and give it their all on the wall. The falling off and chucking a wobbly is a bit much. I'm 100% guilty of doing that. I definitely did that, and I think I did that from I guess kind of watching some of the Adam Ondra stuff, and I'm obviously disappointed when I fall off, but I think watching those Adam Ondra videos almost kind of gave me an excuse to do that, and that's like it's totally not cool. And I feel like over the last sort of 5 years ish, I've gotten a lot better, and now it's just like I don't so much. Um, you can still be frustrated and all that, but it's yeah. Anyway, chucking a wobbly like that is not cool, and that's not fun for anyone at the cliff. But I think that anyone that stands there and at the base of the crag and watches someone give it their all on a boulder or give it their all on a sport route or whatever it is, it's like it's an inspiring thing to see someone try and go for their potential. And if you do fall off on that first move or you do fall off really low, and it's like that happens, like our climbing is there because it is a challenge, and there will be those little ups and downs and bumps in the road, and that's just totally okay. And it's just we go, okay, cool, what did I learn from that go? Oh, I was like way too much in my head, like I was thinking way too much. I was so worried about what everyone was thinking, and all of the eyes felt like they were on me, and that was like crippling. I'm not going to do that again. And then you shy away from taking your own space again at the crag, and that sucks. But what we want to do is just go, okay, cool, I've learned from that, and maybe I can learn a little bit more. And it might be that this muscle that we're building of taking our own space at the crag, it grows over 2 years. I think it's so easy, especially with these soft skills, to feel like it's just an on-off switch, and it's just totally not there. Like it's it's really hard. Like you can't just go, sweet, I'm suddenly confident, happy days, like I'm gonna strut around like I've on side of the hardest things in the world. um it'll just be a process, and it'll take years potentially to do that. And honestly, I still feel a little bit silly at the crag sometimes, uh, trying to kind of get into my headspace. And it's like, yeah, it's okay. It's like, let's just admit that we're human. Let's admit that like we all feel different bits and pieces, and let's just try and give it a go anyway. Because at the end of the day, like all we're doing is disappointing ourselves if we don't, if we don't give ourselves that opportunity. Like
Mhm.
it actually just doesn't matter about anyone else. Like so long as we're not hurting people, obviously, in whatever way. But like, if you just want to go and give it your all, just like I've come home from the crag and just been a bit bummed with myself for not like doing the thing that I said I was going to do as I was walking in or driving to the crag that day. And you're like, I didn't commit to that today, and that sucks. Like, and it's not because I was scared or whatever, or like I didn't give myself the opportunity to do that, and I'm disappointed in that. And like I always want to be giving myself the opportunity. The result doesn't matter. The results will look after themselves after a while, but I've got to step into that space and give myself that opportunity. And yeah, and think of it as a really long term thing.
Yeah, that idea where mental gains and whatever new style you're trying to adopt. I said style almost like it's a physical thing, but that confidence or that decision to take something seriously. I love that you said it's a process. It's not a switch, and I feel like that's one thing that doesn't get talked about enough when it comes to quote unquote mental training. Is that like there is a training aspect. It's not just a, oh, you heard the secret magic sentence and now you just tell it to yourself and everything's great. It's like, no, that's part of the journey. So, and
Yeah,
I also really liked what you said where you love seeing people struggle and put it all out there on the wall and have success. And you didn't say if it's 5:15, you just, that's not the point. It actually makes me think of, I remember I was in like a powerlifting gym in college. I was a very bad power lifter. I'm just a skinny kid. And I had this like shaking max effort at like 300 pounds. And this is around people who are doing like 700 pounds, 800 pounds deadlift. And they were so psyched for me because I mean, I like almost blacked out. I really put it all out there. And I think that the people who recognize you at the cliff taking it seriously will are the kind of people that you want to be around and climb, and they will help you and see, oh, you like this too, like you're into it also. Okay, I'm with you. Where if someone doesn't feel that same way, that's maybe not the kind of crowd you want to surround yourself with. So
yeah, and
good stuff,
I
man.
really think I really think that like most people want to be taking it seriously in their own kind of way, but most people that don't are just a bit like afraid to, like they're a bit shy to, and like it just takes that one brave person to like kind of step into that space and go, I'm going to, and suddenly everyone's like, oh yeah, oh well, if Sally's doing that, yeah, far out, I might do that as well. Like, that's inspiring. And like you can turn it from being all about you and you feeling certain things to being like, I could inspire someone else to achieve their potential, to feel like they can take their space. And I think that's, yeah, that is special. Like when it goes away from, you thinking about it being all about you and what impact you could have on others.
Hmm. Well, what was the catalyst for you taking it seriously, and then how did it show up in your climbing and training?
Um, yeah, I'm really not sure if there was like a moment. Like I grew up in Brisbane, started climbing when I was 12. I was like always climbing around the house, just like in the mango tree in the backyard. I'd watch George of the Jungle movies and then go and like swing around in the mango tree in the backyard. And like just always loved climbing. And my folks got me signed up to the climbing gym, and it's just like I loved it straight away. But it was always sort of mixed in. Like I'm not that person that was like, I was in there 7 days a week for the rest of my life. Like it was every Saturday morning at the kids club that was essentially glorified babysitting. And I would also be doing like cricket on the weekend and soccer and rugby and swimming and track and field and cross country and basketball, volleyball, like you name the sport, I did it. And it would always go hand in hand with my climbing. And so it was always just like, I always knew that climbing was my main thing, even when I was doing it sort of that once or twice a week as I came up through my sort of teenage years. But always really loved having the other stuff in my life and that balance. I think when I finished school and I started working, I started to climb a little bit more, and I would be able to go away on weekends and like still just not taking it super seriously, but it definitely became a bigger part of my life. And that was a really fun transition to be like, I guess almost feel like I could step into this kind of being a climber in a way. Like a lot of my decisions started to just revolve around how can this help me climb more, basically. And after, so I finished school, I was working, I went on a couple of climbing trips. I went to Thailand, went to Yangshu, went to Rocklands, like Rocklands in 2011 or something. Like, it's so funny watching it now, like the amount of problems and all of these things, like the evolution of it all. But on that Rocklands trip, I met some guys from Australia, and they're like, "Oh, you should just like." I'd always thought about moving down to the Blue Mountains. It's 1,000 kilometers south from where I grew up, so like 600 miles, a full day drive. And we'd been down to the Blue Mountains on little climbing trips, and I always thought like that'd be a rad place to live. And but it just seemed like a big decision, and because it's like, oh, I've got to move away from like everyone I know. I knew one person in the Blue Mountains, and they had a spare room. It's like, I'll just do it. And but it was kind of just this idea of like a um, prolonged climbing trip. Like I'd saved up a bit of money. I'd got my tax return and was like, sweet, I've got like enough to sustain maybe 6 months if I sort of eat tuna and pasta. Um, and then I met my partner. We bought a house. We've got a kid. Like, life just sort of took roots here, and climbing just became more and more a part of our decision making. Like, my partner's a climber as well, super high level climber. And we just, yeah, like, I don't know, like where that happened. It just, we're just climbers, and all of our decisions happen around climbing. And there's this like real conflict, honestly, of like, oh man, we'd like potentially be in a better financial position if we weren't, making all of our decisions around going climbing and like optimizing our work so that we can work as little as possible, but still have really nice things in our life. But to have enough time to go climbing midweek and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Let me know if you figure out that balance.
Yeah, far out. It is hard. But I think that honestly is like what taking climbing seriously means to us. Like, it's an investment in our happiness. I think it's so easy to say that climbing doesn't matter. It's like in the grand scheme of things, what does climbing matter? And it's like, man, it gives us so much happiness and purpose in our life, and us being more happy and more purposeful makes us way better at being a human. And that means that like all of the interactions that we have with people are way more positive. Like, and you can just you're just a better person. You can show up better at work. You can do a better job, and you can just have a greater, bigger impact. And like, that's climbing for us, and that's taking it seriously. Um, but I guess in terms of like really digging into like fun, hard pieces of climbing, I think part of it is just like a little spark in the back of your mind going, I wonder if I could climb that. And just doing those little things to uh, make it possible to put yourself in a position to try those bits of climbing. And I think that probably happened around like 2016 sort of thing, whereas like I was bolting a couple of things that were, a bit harder. I'd climbed a bunch of stuff that was already established in the Blue Mountains, like a bunch of the sort of like 33s. So, 8C, 14B kind of stuff. And I'd done a bunch of them kind of quickly. And you're just like, oh, I wonder if I could like, climb a little bit harder. And I wonder if I could, find something that's harder and bolt that and all these sorts of things. And you just sort of like, it was this sort of journey of discovery in a way of just like finding what I could maybe do.
Well, we talked about how that era you started in basically made fun of training, or training was not allowed or looked down upon. But it seems like when you take something seriously, it means that you do everything you can in all facets to really optimize to have the results that you're looking for in whatever domain you're looking for. So when did training enter into your prep for climbing?
Yeah. Um, I always knew that I should train, and I never did. I would have these stints of trying to train, and would go, okay, cool. Like, I've heard with training, you got to ease into it. Okay, so first session of fingerboarding, I'm just going to take it nice and easy. Second set of fingerboarding, or second like session of it. Uh, okay, now it's time to really. Oh, I've got a sore finger now. Actually, that really hurt, and like I would just overdo it every time. And so then I'm like, stuff this. Like I don't like training. I don't want to do it, and I would just go out and climb a lot. And I would say that like the climbing training didn't enter in until I was starting to transition into more of the competitions. So I did a bunch of the youth comps when I was a kid, did nationals, went to World Youth Champs, did that sort of stuff. But I never really kind of trained for that. It was just like I would go to the climbing gym. Whereas when I was like looking at trying to qualify for the Olympics, that happened, I think, in like 2018 was the decision of like, or maybe 2019, 2018 was like, okay, like I want to go for this actually. Um, and I need to make myself a competition climber. I need to learn how to do those competition boulders, and I need to bring myself up. Like I had a body shape and style that did really well on the rocks here in the Blue Mountains. Like it's generally hard, sort of ish bouldery sequences on edges, and you get a bit pumped. And I could just kind of like, I'm a dweeby dude. Like my whole the O'Halloran family is a skinny, scrawny sort of thing. I had no muscle, and as soon as my arms got sort of further out, or my hands got further out than my elbows, like everything went to poo. Um, and so I needed to fix that to get better at those competition boulders and all that sort of thing. And so I sort of like started to give myself a bit of a training program. Like I'd always listened to training stuff, so I had a bit of an idea of things I could do, and I slowly brought that in for my competition stuff. And then it wasn't until I qualified for um, the what was it? I think I qualified for the Oceania titles. And then I worked with a friend, Lee Cossey, who's a super high level climber here in Australia, has done like proper exciting stuff in Yosemite. Like, I can't remember the route, El Nino, I think. He he had like an on-site attempt and like only fell off because a hold broke, and it was for like the second descent after the Hoobers or something. And
Hmm.
like he ran out this one pitch on a like tiny RP piece, 5 meters, that the Hoobers had top roped on the first descent, and he was leading it. Like he's phenomenal, and he's also a physio and just understands climbing. I've probably butchered that whole story. But I remember on this, he's going to be like, Tom, that wasn't how it happened. But I do remember reading an article of him being run out on this pitch on sighting, and the Hoobers just being like, oh my God, that's insane. Um, yeah, he's done all this awesome stuff. And he's also a really great physio and understands climbing physiology and movement in a way that like almost no one else in the world does. Like his mind is so incredible. And I just put all of my faith in him to help me with my climbing training for trying to qualify for the Olympics. And then once I qualified, going into that, and the transformation I had was insane. Like it was the first time I'd actually properly sat down to a proper training program and gone for it. And it was just like, we're going to build strength, we're going to build power, we're going to build ability. And it made such a massive difference to me.
I,
And the transition between like pre Olympics Tom and post Olympics Tom is enormous.
I know this is both like an obvious question and like an impossible question, but in this context, like what is training? Because you had climbed, easily climbed mid 514 pre-training, and like it's just it's again it's kind of like a really simple question and not a really simple question.
Yeah, so I think like training for me prior to all of that, like yeah, I had climbed um 34, 35 kind of thing and bouldered I think maybe V13. Um Honestly, a lot of it just happened on the rock and on boards. Like it was just climbing. So for me, like one of the probably like the number one thing that made a huge difference in my sport climbing was upping the level of my lap routes at the cliff. Like we all go to the cliff and we all do our lap routes or whatever it is. Like I've climbed this before, but I'm gonna climb it again, and I'm gonna do it 3 times today because I'm at the cliff and there's nothing else to do. And when I was climbing at that like 33 level, I would be doing laps on 29s, so like 8A, 14C, 14B kind of level. And there was just this moment where it was like, these are too easy, and I can do laps on it for like, 6 laps. It's like, I'm going to make it the routes that I actually feel a little bit intimidated by. And I started to try and like red point routes that I'd had, previously taken me 10 days or something to do. I'm going to try and do them in a day. Like my level has increased since then, but I'm going to try and like do that 32 14A today. I'm going to red point it. And it's going to be like go up, put the draws on, remember the moves, and have like 2 really good shots. And I was actually like kind of intimidated about it because it's like, oh man, if I can't, I've already done this. And if I can't redo it, like, what does that mean? But
Unsend it.
yeah, he's like, do I undersend it? Like, are people going to see me like falling off this thing that I've already done and be like, did he really do that? Uh, but like sometimes I would do it, sometimes I wouldn't. But I suddenly got this confidence that like, oh, I could actually run laps on 32, like on 14As rather than the the ones grades easier. And like suddenly I just lifted to that level, and it was hard, but suddenly it's like, oh, I can like show up to the cliff and I can run laps on this ultra bouldery 14B, and I can do like 3 laps on it. And I just became such a more confident climber, such a better climber. And like again, it was like, I was talking about that earlier in bouldering of like standing underneath and putting myself in that kind of red point headspace. It was like, you know, when I was on those easier routes, I could almost have a conversation with people as I was going through the crux, and I could, but on those harder lap routes, it's like, oh, I actually need to be switched on, and I need to try, and it just gave me more opportunities to practice being in that red point headspace. Uh, but it also gave me confidence, and it's this idea that I've been playing around with a lot recently, and I'm pretty keen to try and implement it as I kind of dig my teeth into a new sport climbing project for myself at the moment. Like, how many times has it taken days on a project to send something, and then you can just run laps on it afterwards? Like, there's this freeness to it, and I've been playing around with that idea for years of like, how can I bring that in way earlier into my um, red pointing process? Like, have that freeness of like, whatever, like I'll just climb it, like before it actually happens, and take that confidence and that carefreeness into red pointing way earlier. And I think that was one of the big things that I realized was that the headspace that I could be in to run laps on those hard routes was different. And it's like I want to try and like pull this thread into a current project, and that's Yeah, I think that's an interesting kind of concept, and that was one of the biggest things that I learned.
I, I've had that conversation with a few people now where they red pointed their hardest thing, and then for some other reason they went back and repeated it, often for the camera or for a friend, and found it extremely easy, and it just kind of messed with their mind. But so there is something about being able to take that understanding, that knowing that once you do red point it, it somehow is something that can be just repeated. But I also think that something you said there about training that I'm going to tease out that I thought was really cool is that you have to be able to continually reframe and push yourself. So that's a big part of what training is that you do something and then you have to say, okay, like maybe I'm capable of more. Cause I guess it's really hard for me to think about you doing your first 32 or 33 and then telling your future self, like, oh, you're just going to run laps on this later. You're like, no, no, it took me 10 sessions. This was right at my limit. I barely pulled it off. It's like, yeah, but that's what, you really continually having that consistency of pushing the level. And to me, that's actually kind of fundamental to training. It's this consistency of showing up and doing better than last time again and again and again over a long period.
Yeah, and it's like, man, the climber that I want to be, like the routes that I want to climb, like that level of climbing needs to be simple. Like it's just like if I want to climb more routes at grade 36, 32 and 33 just need to be simple. And I I also like I partly fell into that trap of being like, you know, wanting to be the cool guy at the cliff that just ran 6 laps on August 1914, which is a classic route in the middle of the crag here in the Blue Mountains. It's like I want to, run laps on that all day, and it looks cool. Everyone's like, "Wow!" Like it's not helping me actually. Like it's actually not helping me. All I'm doing is wasting skin, and that in no way helps. And like I remember when I was a kid, I remember thinking like if I ever climbed grade 30, so that's like 13C, if I ever climbed that, like happy days. I'm out. Like retirement. That is like I didn't know anyone that had climbed that grade where I grew up. Like it was big news that one of the girls at the gym was going to go out and try a 26 on the weekend. Like and everyone was so like it was almost like she was going off to the Olympics. It's like, did you hear that Tiff is going to go off and climb this? Try. She's going to tie in to this route. Like that was the space that I was in, and so grade 30 was like massive. And like I've now on-sighted 2 grades harder than that, and I it's just inconceivable that that would ever happen. But you constantly just need to, in small ways, just like bring it up, bring it up, bring it up, because we are better. It's like, um, I don't know, at school, like things that are just like ultra basic concepts that we just take for granted now were really hard for us. Like, learning to read or something. It's like, we can now just plow through like the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I say that I haven't done it at all. Too many words. But like, that's where it's at. Like we just, if we, I think we really need to have like those honest conversations with ourselves. It's, that good to great. It's like, yeah, you've got to be honest with yourself and go, what's the climber that I want to be? What does that person do? And it doesn't need to be like a full dive into like counting your macros and tracking your training through AI spreadsheets and all that sort of stuff. But there's definitely probably some low hanging fruit. And for me, it was bringing up those lap routes. But yeah, I guess like also in terms of like, what else was I training? It was like, yeah, it was training at the cliff and practicing my craft. Like I really think that these days people, I've got a theory that the technique and the climbing ability of someone that climbs, uh, 26, so mid 512s 20 years ago, that person has way better climbing technique and skill than someone that is climbing mid 513s now. Like I think that with the climbing gyms and our overemphasis on strength training and all of that sort of thing, fingerboarding, having all of that, like I think that we have forgotten about bringing up the skill of actually being able to rock climb. And I would say that if there was sort of one superpower in a way that I have is like being able to rock climb, and it's obviously like it's an intangible, um, so it's hard to track that stuff. It's hard to kind of train it in a way, in the way that we do for fingerboarding. Um, but I think that that there's that bell curve of strength that like Lattice and those people that have put together for how strong do you need to be, or what's the average strength for people to climb a certain grade. And I really think that we almost want to be like trying to be on the lower end of that to a degree. Like these are going to be broad sweeping statements here, um, but like I think that we're overly strong for what is necessary, uh, and you kind of end up wasting time and going out and just becoming a more efficient, more confident, a more well-rounded climber to go out and do those projects is a massive thing. Like I really think that like if there's people out there at the moment that can one arm hang that middle edge on the Beastmaker and they're climbing um, under V11, stop. You do not need stronger fingers. Like it's just I can't hang that. I can't hang the middle edge on the Beastmaker, and I think my record on that is 3 seconds when I was like as strong and fit as I'd ever been. I can't do one arm chin ups. I've done less than 10 in my life, and that was like in the middle of the um, Olympic training. It's like if you can do a one arm chin up, stop training that stuff. You just Adam Ondra became bouldering World Cup champion without needing to do that. It's easy to knit like sort of cotton pick those uh, examples of people that don't train and are awesome or whatever. But I think that there's just some of those like really simple things that we're just over indexing on with our climbing.
Well, I also I just know because I've watched so much of your content and even what we're talking about here, you're definitely not against training, and you've used it to massive effect. And I
Yeah,
think the thing that's always interesting here is Adam Ondra famously didn't train, especially as a kid. He onside a lot of routes. He was just kind of lots of mileage, and I would argue, Adam Ondra is a one of the best climbers. Just fundamentally
yeah,
skill wise, a climber. But then he went through a period where he trained intensely. I just those videos of him with Patchy, and I mean the guy, the amount of effort that guy put into the gym alongside doing college, it was really a volume that only someone could earn through a whole lifetime of climbing. And I would argue he used it to good effect. And so it's it's this thing where training really pays off when you in the context of someone with that skill. But how do you think one of the problems with these metrics, we've had this discussion before, is that they don't always necessarily tell you what they purport to tell you. So just because someone can hang an edge, maybe their fingers aren't quite as strong as the edge might suggest, or whatever metric you pick. So what are some indications for people that maybe they're too deep into the physical training, and maybe we could even relate it to boards, since I think that you spend a lot of time on boards. People who are psyched, frothing, do a lot of board climbing. It might be a better microcosm for people to understand if, hey, maybe this is an area that they need to put, back off on a little bit and let their other skills catch up.
yeah. Good use of the word frothing. I think that worked
Yes.
nicely in
Sweet.
there. Yeah, it's nicely done, and it sounded natural as well. So well played. Sometimes when you slide those words in, it can feel a little forced. So worked well. Yeah, so like I definitely when I said earlier that like I was like, no, I don't want to train. I think for me training is boring if it is stuff like fingerboarding, that sort of thing. But training for me is doing laps on routes outside. It's spending time on the board and having a little bit of structure around what I'm doing on the board. And so, like a board session for me at the moment, I've just been bouldering for a while, and I'm, excuse me, I've jumped back onto a sport project, and I'm feeling the pump, and it's not a pumpy route at all. I've just got like no capacity. So I'm now going from doing the harder boulder problems to bring my kind of strength and max power up, or maintain it to a degree, but also putting in some endurance circuits. So I've got some nice 40 move circuits that I'm starting to get some pump going, and starting to get a bit of pump going at the cliff. Um, and that for me is what training looks like, and that's what is really fun. It's like almost entirely with my climbing shoes on. And I think, for people like the tension board, the moon board, those sorts of things, they're a really great opportunity to compare yourself to other people in a positive way. And so, like in terms of like us looking at our strengths, and what we can do and what other people can do. Um, so if you're kind of wondering like, how far have I gone too far, or have I not gone far enough with my training, or whatever, I think it's really interesting to climb with other people and just see what their strengths and weaknesses are. Um, at the local bouldering gym that we've got up here, it's kind of like the schoolroom of Australia. It's just like grungy board room. Like there's guys in there that can out train me every day of the week in terms of like those simple metrics. But then we get onto the board, and like there's a guy that I was in there, and he's so strong, and he's taller than me, and he couldn't keep tension on this boulder that I had set, and it was like not that hard, sort of relatively speaking. It was probably like he'd I think bouldered V11 or 12, and this is probably like a V9 sort of boulder, and he would have to do the move with a cut, and it's like, man, just like keep your foot on. And like I couldn't do the move with the cut. Like it was insane the amount of power that I had to throw down, and strength and everything. It's like so much simpler to just keep your foot on the board, and he just couldn't do that. And I think there's like super simple things there where it's like, oh wow, there's like obviously a big thing that we're missing in terms of like tension through our body. um, yeah, I think it's cool to see the different ways that people climb, and it's like body shapes are going to play a big difference in how people move and climb things. But if you can find someone that's like sort of similar in height and build and everything, and try and see like what are they lacking, that and still getting up this thing, like how do I say that, like you basically just compare in a way, and just see where we're at. I think the boards are so simple in a way, like they're an incredible training tool if you know how to use them well. And there's some out there that really, I made a video on it recently where it's just like front wheel drive. I think the moonboard is especially guilty of this, uh, because you've got really good feet most of the time, and it's just like everyone knows that moonboard style. Like you just jump and cut, and it's just like it's not outdoor climbing, which is ultimately the thing that we all want to be getting better at, mostly. Um, and or if that's everyone's jam or people's jam, it's like I want to go to the boulders and do better. And what I'm training during the week makes me tired. It makes me feel strong. I'm watching these metrics go up, but the performance ground is not getting better. Like I'm not performing better on these things, or maybe the strength gains and everything are like 3 times as good as they were last year, but I haven't progressed nearly as far in my outdoor performance. And I think that's when you got to have a really hard look at yourself and go like, what am I missing? And I think for a lot of people that spend a lot of time on a board, it's that board climbing style, it's the jumping and cutting. And what we want to be doing actually is like really trying to dig in a little bit more into how do I replicate some of that climbing style, outdoor climbing style and movement onto a board. And so I think this is where something like the tension board too is so incredibly good, because the feet are bad. Like they're so bad, and you've got to keep tension on stuff. And the variety of the holds, like there's some big grips, there's some little grips, and you really need to keep tension through things. Like there's definitely moves where you cut, but I think it's such an incredibly well executed tool for getting better as an outdoor climber. And like I see so many people just like get so much stronger and not be able to translate it because they just uh um it's easy to get sucked into like doing more benchmarks, and the style that you need for cut and sick on benchmarks is different to what you're going to find in the boulders on the weekend or on your sport routes.
Yeah, usually. Sometimes you do find that nice big jump catch come
Yeah.
in handy, but
Sky.
there you go. You're right. um, I just will never forget. I was doing all the benchmarks or trying to do all the benchmarks, and I can't remember what climb it was, but it was probably around like the V7 to V9 range. And sometimes the grades are a little all over the place on the benchmark, so I don't want to hold them too much to this grade. But I remember doing a few climbs and thinking they were quite easy for the grade, and then doing a couple of climbs right afterwards that really required you to cut. It was mandatory. It was actually mandatory. And the other ones I was able to keep my feet on, and I saw that people found some of the ones where you had to keep your or could keep your feet on. They thought they were just as hard, but I knew as a climber who is pretty good at getting extended, I was like, no, these are way easier. If you just keep your
Yeah.
feet on, it's way easier. So I want to dig into this a little bit more, because the truth is that we do spend time on the boards a lot, especially when it's in your garage and you have a kid, because we're not getting out as much as we'd like. And, there is this ability for some of us to climb on maybe spray walls or system boards that are more suited for requiring us to put weight on our feet. But how can one go about kind of mitigating that issue of climbing more with your upper body, or even just describing that front wheel drive more? Because that your last video was this, well, let me see if I have the title here. It was "Board Climbing is Killing Your Outdoor Climbing." And you got me a click on it right away, because I do a lot of board climbing. And even though I have no problem really focusing on board climbing, I love outdoor climbing just as much. And so I don't want my board climbing to kill my outdoor climbing.
Yeah. It was an attempt at being a little bit more salacious with my title there. It's definitely a
You
clickbaity one I
got
put
me.
out
You
there.
got me.
Yeah, it's like if there's a weakness in my YouTube at the moment, it's the titles and thumbnails. Yeah, look, I think that the boards are an incredible training tool. Like it is the best that we've got to get better at our craft. And there are, I probably, when I put up my moonboard videos on there, because I've done a couple where it's like comparing the easiest and hardest benchmarks of each of the sets. And like one of the number one comments is like, "Oh my god, how do you keep your feet on?" And it's like, because if they come off, I am stuffed. Like I've got nothing. So like it's definitely something that I need to get better at, is like some of that raw strength. I feel like at this point that is the movement forwards for my climbing. But making use of boards for ourselves in our own climbing, like it's super efficient, it's super great. I think that some of the key things that we want to be looking for is um like, can we put in a drop knee? How can we make this sequence feel like, sometimes I like, if I'm a little bit bored on the board, or a bit stuck or something, I'll try and replicate some crux moves of things that I've, maybe it's a video I've seen of like someone, um, on Sleepwalker or something like that. And you just like try and make some of those movements because you you don't see big cut looses generally on some of those things. And it's kind of a fun way to sort of just play around and reset your climbing um, and board training. But I do really like trying to make what we're training work as efficiently as possible for the outdoor stuff. I guess like each week for me, I'd probably have like 2 or 3 board sessions, and I'll play around with like a, a max boulder, like a project sort of session, um, one that has maybe a little bit more volume in the like 80% range of my ability. So that's generally just like a bit of volume around that sort of 10, 11 mark, 9, 10, 11. And then I've been throwing in a bit of endurance sort of stuff as well, plus a bit of time at the cliff. Um, yeah, I think that like trying to find the nuances in the board movement, like it's simple to just think about like just pulling harder. I was playing around the other morning on a warm up of how much weight I could put through my feet, but like the avenue I came through it was like I'm going to try and climb up my steep 45-degree wall with kind of straight arms and not try and pull through a move and see like just move around on the board. And it was amazing how much of my weight suddenly started to like really push through a foothold, or like your toes are really digging into the back of a footer and like you're almost like peeling it out off the wall. And I think like it was contriving a situation to like straight arms to really focus on my feet. And you go, oh wow, like that's how much weight can actually go through my feet. That's how I can use my feet. Imagine if I was thinking about that even more when I was like trying to do something really hard for myself. And there's just those little resets that you can have. I really like when I'm trying a hard move to think about like you kind of just pull on to it and just jump. It's like, oh, what's going on? And I'd like to kind of think about just like one thing. It's like I'm going to think about just my left foot. What's that doing? And then I'll do the move. Like, oh, okay, not much. What does it look like if I really push with that? What does it look like if I, um, you know, pull quickly? Or like there's just like all these little bits and pieces to think about for when we're doing some of those hard moves, and just being a conscious driver through a climb rather than like I can be really bad at finding sequences, or I'm really good at finding sequences. I'm really bad at finding the most efficient ones. um, like so many of my first ascents can be just like people are like, oh, why don't you just do this? You're like, ah, oh, far out. Like, how did I never see that? And sometimes I've found a really great sequence, but yeah, it's easy to just sort of go, oh, cool, that worked, move on. And I think we can like go back and especially on like the tension board or something like that, where them or a moon board where there might be um, more videos of like people doing it with different sequences and stuff. And it's like, let's play around with like 3 different ways that I can climb this boulder, and I'm going to watch what other people have done and try and do that. Or like if it's on your own home board, like I'm going to do it quickly, I'm going to do it slowly, I'm going to do it not cutting. And it's like it's okay if like I'm going to find this 3 grades harder by not cutting. Like this is just going to be a training tool, and that's okay. It's like, yep, it's gone from uh, V6 to V9, but sure, I'm training like keeping tension on this, or I am training to cut. Like for me at the moment, like I want to be setting more spread out dynamic movements, and it's like, oh my gosh, I feel like such a kitten on the wall. Like I feel so weak and not good. But it's like this is the next little like bump in my climbing, and to use the tool there to be getting better and just like contriving some of those little scenarios for yourself is super fun. And like especially like I've got my own home board, so it's easier to look like a weak kitten by myself in my garage. But it's still just it it's easy to pull yourself up short on sticking to the plan. Like we were talking about, taking it seriously. It's like it's okay if people look over on the wall and see you flailing about. If you're trying to practice getting your toe hooks better, like my toe hooks going into the Olympics or going into that like sort of competition style, it's like they're so bad, so incredibly bad. Like it was like painted on. Like I could heel hook like nobody's business. Like I consider myself a very good heel hooker. Toe hooking, nothing. And I just needed to work on it, and I needed to get better at it. Like I was really bad at dynamic movement. I I really enjoyed wanting to control a movement and have the ability to kind of like half, pull, like tickling your fingers up to a hold and just like, creeping them over the top, because it meant that like if the movement didn't quite go as I'd wanted, there was an opportunity to like almost back off and come back down. And it was scary to think about committing to a dynamic movement, because there's that point of no return. Like as soon as you go for that dead point, if you've kind of stuffed it, especially, for an on-site or something, if you've stuffed it, you're off, and there's no retreating, and that's scary. But if you can practice that on the wall and then you bring it out to like maybe just your warm-ups at the cliff, and you're practicing moving dynamically at the cliff on something that is easy for you. So there is margin there. And you might even be like making a move that doesn't need to be done dynamically. You make it dynamic just to give yourself that opportunity to practice. And just like I think that anytime that we're looking at trying to develop a new skill, to bring it back to like something super, super, super simple. Like we don't want to like practice our dribbling for the first time in the middle of the court in the NBA. Like it's too much. Like what we want to be doing is just bringing it back to a really simple, safe space, and just learning the skill slowly. And so, like for me, with that dynamic movement, I just started playing around, and it was probably 3 or 4 years before I was like, "Oh, cool, I can." It's still a weakness, but I definitely feel like I can move dynamically when I need to, and I know how to move myself through space. It was the same with the toe hooks. Like I would just toe hook everything in my warm ups, just so that I could get used to how it feels, and like go, okay, cool. Like what is my glute doing as I'm toe hooking on here? How does the tension in my body work between like, am I creating tension from my hips to my toe? Is that how this toe hook works? How does it feel if I transfer that like tension from my hand through to my toe? And how does that feel? How like just playing around with it in a really easy environment where there's not all of this other noise going on, made a
Yeah.
just massive difference. And my toe hooks have gone since. Like I haven't, after all of that competition climbing, I need to get them back, because I've got this boulder project at the moment that requires toe hooks. And it's like, oh, I need to bring these back.
Make a video, because I'm one of those people that really struggles with toe hooking, but my heel hooking is excellent. I I think that there almost is these two types of people. There's heel hookers and toe hookers, and I often liken it to, or I can often predict based if someone is a bit more duck footed versus pigeon toed. Like that pigeon toe style seems to toe hook really well. But yeah, I mean, what I hear from you is back to this honing your craft, and I keep hearing you say these things as tools, and I think it's something that is tricky for a lot of climbers, is you just kind of are always performance oriented. And it's really hard for me to take a step back and not just try to do the benchmark because I want to send the benchmark. Or like even when you talked about doing laps on climbs at the crag, well, first of all, you said it was because you had done all the ones at the crag. And I was like, I'm never there. And I don't know if I've ever really repeated a route I've done ever as training. So I, I don't know. There's just there's a lot there about the care you put in that is really resonating with me, and I think that the board stuff I find really interesting because actually I got to tell you I don't know if you should look at videos of people on the moon board because I found that when I did that they often always cut and then I would try to do that and I would realize it was way harder like that. And something that I do to something that I've done a little bit on the boards to try to make myself a little less front wheel drive because I have a propensity for that, Tom. I'm actually, despite my long history of climbing, I'm more of the power climber lacking technique. Maybe I'm not, egregious, but I would say it's a weaker point for me. And what I find, especially on moon boards, but in board climbing in general, is when you have one foot, people often use their arm to get weight on the foot to then go and move. And outdoors, or even just in good climbing, usually you're using your other foot to move your hips to get weight on that foot and then pull through your arm. And so, I just, I don't know what you think of that. Maybe you can see if I'm on the right track there to try to take focus off of the arms and put them back on your feet, initiating the movement.
Yeah, 100%. Like there's this sort of early idea that I heard around movement of feet, knees, hips. And it's basically like that's how movement can be initiated is like it starts from your toe and you're pulling with your toe and then your knees start kind of moving through in that direction and then your hips flick up and then I guess that the next thing along the chain is your chest coming through and oftentimes your hand just follows. Like the amount of times with a hard movement that I just don't think about trying to get my hand there and I just try and get my body in space there. Like it's I don't know if people have like played with that before, but it is one of the biggest unlocks for uh hard climbing movement is just think about getting your body into space. Like get your body to where it needs to be. And sometimes that looks like holding the end position and going, okay, cool, it's here. And then come back and then just try and get your body in space. Your hand knows how to grab stuff. Like you often don't need to think about it. And when you start to think about getting your body into space, I think that's when that your brain can start to think differently about how to solve that problem. And a lot of the time, at least in my experience, that's when it comes back to the feet because you've the feet kind of drive, in my experience, how the body moves through because of that feet, knees, hips thing. If we're thinking about just trying to jump up and grab that thing, we will gravitate back to doing that. Like I think so many of us, I don't know if this is going to be a good analogy or not, but a lot of us have probably ended up, with a gree going too fast. And what you do is you hold the thing that's moving even more to try and slow it down. And then you end up burning the poo out of your hands rather than letting go of the thing that actually makes it stop. And it's like it's really easy to think about, if we're trying to just jump up and grab a hold, it's easy to think about just grabbing the hold and then to grab a hold while we're thinking about our arms. Okay, cool, we're going to pull with our arms instead of like doing the thing that actually like drives the whole sort of movement.
Yeah, dude, Tom, this is exactly the nuance that I love seeing come out of your work. It's it's something that I try to tease out where when we think of trying hard, it's often like I'm going to pull up even harder, I'm going to grab even faster, I'm going to crimp this even harder, and the real difficulty is being like, okay, I'm going to coordinate this move from my toe to my knees to my hips and follow through. And that coordination of trying hard, it doesn't excuse your ability or it doesn't excuse the necessity to actually physically focus and try hard. It's just recognizing the complexity of the movement instead of just doubling down on, no, I'm just going to like crimp harder. Like
Yeah.
that's like doesn't work out.
And I think that if we think about a single movement, almost like an entire climb, like an entire climb has a sequence where it's like, left hand, left hand, match, then, feet are going to come around here and do all of that. But if you break that down to like how a single movement goes, it's not, very rarely is it both hands and both feet all pulling at like 25%, everything taking equal weight and all pushing and pulling and everything at the same time. There can often be like a choreography to how a move happens, and it'll be like, okay, I'm gonna start the movement with there's a route groove train on Taipan Wall. Can't
Famous.
climb it anymore because, yeah, so I've climbed that route. It's like absolute incredible route. But there's like pretty much one of the first hard moves that you have to do. You're a tad run out, and you're on two good edges, and you've got a good ish kind of right footer and a bit of a smeary kind of thing with your left foot. And you need to do it like just full span sort of move across the face. You're like 30 meters up in the air and grab this edge. And there was just this like movement that I needed. I remember someone yelling up, like, you've got to leave the foot behind. You've got to leave the left foot behind. And so that movement, what happened was like your hands, it was reasonably simple. Like you kind of just pull across, and they needed to pull across and in a bit, because if you just pull straight over, because it's slightly overhung, your body is just going to peel backwards off the wall. And so you needed to bring your body into the wall and kind of scoop into it. The left foot was kind of starting the movement, and it would push really hard as the feet, knees, hips were happening with your right foot, and you really dig in. And there was this kind of like interesting transition where your right foot goes from pulling your body across and pulling your hips across to then, like, once you get over that foot, then you're pushing it. And so there was this choreography to like how all of that needed to happen, and all of this needed to happen in a really loose and fluid way. As soon as, like, this is a big one for me, in terms of like needing to learn to just let go and like go with the flow and not try and static through a move. Like I needed the times I would do it was when I just went flick, and I would just like float myself through, pretend to be Tomoa before I knew who Tomoa was. um, you just had to flick yourself through, but there was just this choreography of like, how do I do this movement? And it was like launching off the left foot, pulling and then pushing with the right foot, and swinging those hands in and flicking out. And then as soon as you hit the right hand hold that you're going for, is like like everything needs to kind of just stop and control that movement, create immediate tension, and then you could match feet, come in and match. And it's like this whole kind of thing. So I think, like, if we can think about how, when we do a move, like what is the sequence that needs to happen to do that movement? Like, am I going to initiate with this foot? Am I going to like think about getting like my hips swooping in first? Like it's just playing around, and we just need to like find a kind of moderately hard move and just play around with it. Like it's just like, let's just explore what can happen. And it's not a matter of necessarily doing it. It's not a matter of like ticking something as such. It's like, just like, be switched on to what your body is doing, and just go, oh, interesting. What does that feel like? Oh, that kind of worked. What does this feel like? Oh, like it's just like being a scientist and just like bringing in information, and there's no right or wrong. It's just, if this, then what?
Dude, Tom, you did a really good job of describing that move on Actually, I haven't been there, but you did a really good job of describing the choreography of the move, which I love that you used that term. And this is why I argue that I think harder climb one of the reasons to climb harder is because I think harder climbing is more fun because of what you just described. That was like a 6-step process, and that description of when that the right foothold changed from a pull to a push, and then connecting it all at the end with tension. Also, while you're way above your last piece, and even if it's super safe out there, I've heard that climb is a little exciting. So dude, I don't know, just putting that together, I think it's really underrated. To me, that's what hard climbing is about, and is what makes it so fun and interesting. Is that's not just what you need to do was be stronger so you could really lock it off. And that description was really good. And you kind of covered this, but the next topic that I had is on a YouTube that you put out there, and it was about doing hard moves. And I think you described that choreography, but is there any other way to approach limit moves in your climbing that we didn't tackle there?
Yeah, I think like probably one of the biggest unlocks for your climbing in that space is just approaching it with curiosity. Like if you can approach your the movement with just that open mindset and just being curious, like what could this look like? It's so beneficial because it means that you're just like taking in the information. Like I watched so many people. I ran a little workshop for Global Climbing Day down at a climbing gym recently, and we're going through a few movements and we're going through a couple of things. And I watched this girl jump on the wall. She kind of half tried it, and then like, excuse me, I watched the girl jump on the wall. She half tried this move, didn't do it, fell off, kind of like shoulders slumped, head went down. She kind of like sheepishly turned around and walked back to the group. And I was like, "Hey, what happened there?" She said, kind of explained like, "Oh, blah blah blah." And I was like, "How do you feel?" She's like, "Oh, yeah, not like I can't do that move." I'm like, and it was just this like, yeah, like we had a conversation around like if we approach it with curiosity, we get rid of that emotional uh, sort of I can't think of the word, the reaction. Like if we get rid of the negative reaction there, and you're just like, oh, curious, that didn't work like that. Interesting. What can I play like? What's the thing that I could play around with next? What's an approach that I could have? What if I did it faster? What if I did it slower? What if I, think about my feet? What if I change the trajectory of my body? All those little things. And I think that it makes us have a more open headspace, which makes us more more of a sponge and more opportunistic. Like you really can't approach things with a negative headspace. Like it's just absolutely not helpful at all. And yeah, it like you're getting nowhere. And I think that yeah, that curiosity is a massive thing that you can have in your climbing. And like I'm saying all of these things. I'm not going to pretend that I do it well every single time. Like I was saying earlier in the conversation about like not getting pumped on your warm up. I did that 2 days ago because I kind of wanted to get this link on this project, and I was like, it'd be pretty cool to take it to the top from here. And I'm resting on like the second last rest before this last kind of little boulder problem section. I'm like, oh, I'm a bit too pumped. And I said to my belayer, I'm like, I'm pretty pumped. I should probably let go, but yeah, I'm not going to. And I can definitely get bummed on moves and be like frustrated that I'm not getting through it, and I'm just not in that curious headspace. And so it's a constant reminder to myself. Like I make these videos as much as for myself to like organize my own ideas and be like, oh, that's right. Like the importance of this is massive, actually. And it's like, yeah, I'm definitely not going to pretend that I'm the best at it.
I wonder if this is one of the downfalls of having so many beta videos, is that people get sucked into whatever the most common sequence is, and it's hard. It can be, you say be curious, and I 100% agree. And but I'm shocked at how many times I think I'm being curious and I'm not seeing sequences that do work, or are potentially even like the ones that are the easiest. And I just get sucked into the way that I think I can do it. And one thing that I do think is good about indoor climbing instead of outdoor climbing is that it kind of shrinks the possibilities. You only have so many feet on the wall. And even that, there's probably quite a few more available to you, like say bolt holes, or just smearing on, some kind of angle change in the plywood. But at least there you can say, okay, I'm just going to try to put my foot up by my head. And then you know what?
Yeah.
It freaking worked. Like amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the indoor space is an incredible opportunity for that because as you say, like the opportunities for stuff are greatly diminished. Like someone has actually put that there with an intention and you may not use the exact sequence that they've got, but there's not like an extra little crimp that they like haven't seen kind of thing. And yeah, I definitely I made a video about it a little while ago. I think it was something like stop commoditizing your climbing or something like that. Another bad thumbnail for that one. Um, but I went down to Sydney to try this boulder problem that is like a pretty iconic boulder in Sydney. And it's like 2 or 3 moves. It's called um, the corridor. And I, not many people have climbed it. And I was searching, I was underneath the boulder. Before I'd even really pulled on, I was looking for beta videos. I was like, I'm down here for the day. It's like an hour and a half drive, hour 40 or something for me from home. I needed to get back for school pickup. I was like, I've got a short amount of time. I just tell me what to do. Tell me how to do it. And I was searching around and like spending all of this time and I couldn't find a video. And then I'm texting people that have tried it and I'm like, how do you do like what's the sequence? And it's like it's super simple in terms of like it's only so many holds, it's slightly overhung, it's a very featureless wall. Like what is there is there. And I ended up I caught myself after 20 minutes of like actually not pulling on being like what the hell are you doing? Like use this like I wanted to have climbed it and be like tick, yep, done, don't need to come back, awesome, like just consume. I'm like, oh man, I have lost like by doing this I'm losing my ability to decipher rock, to read rock, to find my own way through it. And I put my phone down and I'd seen that one of the guys had messaged me back and I'm like, I'm not even going to read this, I'm going to leave it. I just actually want to have the experience of working it out for myself and sit here and feel my own body in space and be okay with going home having not done it. And in the end, I did it. So, happy days. Um, but I feel so much prouder of that ascent because I ended up just like committing to myself and backing myself to work it out and being okay with not doing it. And that was fun. And I had to trust what I was feeling and not look at what someone else had done. And it's
Well,
so easy with all of those beta videos to do that. And 100% I am still going to like, if I want to flash something, like I'm 100% going to watch a video and try and absorb as much information as possible. But I think it's so easy to dive too far into that direction of just like not even pulling on and trying to just get the information. And it means that, if we ever get to a point where we pull on and there's not a beta video, we're stumped. We don't understand how to intuitively climb. And I think that working all of that stuff out, like for me, on-site climbing, I love it. I don't get a huge opportunity to do it here in Australia because I've kind of, there's not a huge amount. And as I've sort of come through the grades, because there's not many, I need to have kind of climbed them all, so to speak, to sort of move up into that next bracket. There's a couple that I've left strategically. But yeah, like I think that, for that bouldering and for looking for beta videos and that sort of thing, like I'm diminishing that skill that will allow me to on-site and to adapt and to work things out.
Well, and I'm just going to preface this by saying I look at tons and tons of videos, so I'm just not, I'm not going to, act like I'm perfect on this. But I think the really brutal part there is that you're not just depriving yourself from that experience. You, Tom, have had so much time on the rock beforehand that you have the ability to kind of, I don't know, like you still are good at on-sighting. You've done it a lot. But if you really come up through climbing and you've never done that, it's really tough to understand how to build that choreography on a new move. Or if it's a move and that beta video isn't working for you, there could be two things going on there. There could be that beta is never going to work for you, and you need to go find a new way up that, and you need to figure out your own choreography, or you don't even really understand this term choreography that I'm just using that you used. Like you don't understand how to put those parts together even when you see it, because sometimes just seeing it, it's like, okay, that person's hand went from here to here, but there was a million frames along that journey. So I think that is super important. I just had a funny experience. I was in Squamish, and Squamish can be famously weirdly technical. And in the guidebook, there's a famous climb called Bad Day Low. And there's like a little comment there where, impossible to do unless you know like the trick. So I go there and someone's packing up, and I was like, "Oh, how'd it go?" And he was like, "Oh, cool one." And then he said, "Oh, do you want to know how to do it?" I was like, "No." Like don't tell me. And he was like, "Oh no,
Yeah.
are you sure? Like I know how to do it. Like I can tell." I was like, "No, dude. Like are you not hearing me?" But the thing that's just to be a little honest there, it's a grade that's theoretically quite easy for me, and I didn't flash it, and I got to have that experience. And so it's that practicing that habit lower, where I think my ego might have been more involved. If it was hard for me, I wanted to, I wanted to make sure I ticked it, which is, again, it's this idea of like that long-term vision and honing your craft versus just getting the tick right there, which is a weird thing to balance. And you have to know what you're doing in that moment.
Yeah, and I think that as well, like for me, sometimes like unlocking a sequence like that can feel, on par with a red point. Like there's something where you're like, you're approaching it with that curious mindset. You're trying all these different bits and pieces, and you're working it out, working it out, working it, and then you're like, oh, there it is. Oh my gosh, like that's it. And you just go like, wow, like there's just this like, suddenly the next door has opened, and you're like, this is it. And that's fun. And like, yeah, depriving yourself of that opportunity is, it sucks. I think that's why I really love doing first ascent stuff. Like there's this new area that I'm developing, and there's this sort of boulder that, there's a stand start, it's around V11, there's a sit start. Like, okay, cool, like looks like it's on kind of good holds. There's a couple of moves into, well, basically like move number one from the sit is like grabbing the start hand, the stand start hand hold. But it's, yeah. uh, Session number one on it was like, oh my gosh, this is like V15. Like this is hard. Like there's big holds and everything everywhere. It seems like it should be fine, but it just doesn't work. Like I cannot decipher how to put this together. And I'm trying all these different things. I'm playing around with where's my foot go. I'm chucking a knee bar. That doesn't quite work. What if I put it here? And then got to the end of the day, didn't really have much in the way of a sequence that seemed like it was going to work, and it was a bit like, oh wow, like maybe this is one that won't work out, kind of thing. And then I go back the other day with a friend and start to play around with that same sequence that I was kind of playing with, and just change slightly how I'm approaching it, and then stick the move. And it was like, oh, yes, like it, like that feeling is just awesome. And I love that because there's no temptation of trying to find a beta video when you're doing a first ascent. Um, and it's so much fun, and you just yeah, it can feel as good as ticking something.
I I argued that the newer generation, at least here in America, doesn't do enough outdoor sport climbing or even sport climbing in general. And it's not because it's better, same, or worse. It gives you a few opportunities to just do more moves and do them when people can't really see you to tell you what to do. And my my poor wife, I'm gonna pick on her. We used to joke that I, I could like marionette her up quite hard climbs. She's climbed as hard as V9, and it's just like put your foot here, lock off here. She was really physically strong, and she won't listen to this, so she won't mind. I don't know if she climbed harder than 11D or maybe 12A, 7A, 7A plus
Yeah,
on like a 3 month climbing trip, and it's limestone tufas, just really. It's not even techie. It's just you need to know, oh, look, you can stem behind you. And it's a no hands rest, actually. It's
yeah.
really actually not that hard. And I think it was extremely good for her climbing, but she had to spend so much time alone figuring out moves because I just wasn't there next to her. And yeah, I just encourage people to on site spend time doing moves by themselves. I think it's invaluable in the long run.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I really like that idea. Yeah, when you're up there, you you just left to your own devices.
Well, I would be remiss to totally skip over your most popular YouTube, even though it's kind of like it didn't even have a clickbait title, but it actually got me a click on it because it's about how to tape your fingers correctly. And I watched it because I hate climbing with tape. I hate it, man. And you start out by kind of saying the same thing, and clearly we'll just point people towards that video. But what are just some kind of overarching principles, and also just kind of like mentally, like how do you deal with the idea of taping, and how do you send hard or just like let it into your climbing without it being a detractor?
Yeah, tape sucks. It's a bummer to have to climb on tape. Um, but I think that there's a couple of things. So in that video, I explain like some kind of detailed ways of doing it, and I've tried all sorts of different taping techniques, and for me, this works the best. It's kind of like crisscrossing really fine tape across your fingertips. So it's probably like 8 millimeters or like a bit under a third of an inch, I guess. Thin strips. And like the biggest thing that I would say with it is that it takes time. Like it takes time to actually like learn how to do it well. So like it will take a little bit of practice. And it also just takes time to actually apply it properly. Like when you go to put it on, like it's not just like a oh quick, just like rip 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 done. Like you really want to like layer it in there and do it properly. And it's like it's comes back to that like taking it seriously. Like if you're going to put tape on and you're going to attempt to do it this way that I explain, like don't half-ass it. Like just sit there and it'll take you rather than like I don't know 20 seconds, it might take you 45 seconds, but the result is going to be 400% better. And like climbing on tape, as I say, sucks. So if you can do this as well as possible, it's great. Um, I think that like obviously there are some routes where having tape on just doesn't work. Like this project that I'm trying at the moment, There's a pocket on it. It's called the Red Project. It has been climbed. Alex Megos did the first ascent back in like 2013 when he came to Australia. And it was the first 9A in Australia, which was pretty rad.
That guy loves his
But there's a
tape too.
pocket on it. It's the crux hold that you just really can't have tape on. Like it sucks. Your finger doesn't really fit in the hold anymore, and yeah, it just doesn't really work. But I would say for most climbs, it it can work, and you just need to accept that it is going to be a bit different. Like if you kind of put the tape on and expect everything to just feel the same, you're going to have a bad time. But if you go into it going, okay, cool, I'm taped, it's going to feel a bit different, and I'm just going to be okay with that, and I'm going to accept where that's at. You approach it in a much better mindset, I think. Like if something has happened and you're not willing to accept that that has happened and push through, it's going to be a bad time. So yeah, accept that you've got tape on it, and just kind of keep on climbing.
How long does tape last on your finger for? Is it one attempt? I mean, I guess it's different if it's a sport climb versus a boulder, but just, what are the expectations someone should have if they put the extra effort to tape correctly?
Um, it's going to depend, obviously. As you say, boulder sport, like that's a certain number of moves. I generally like I generally get like 2 or 3 routes out of it, which is kind of enough for the day. So if I'm red pointing, I'll put effort into taping my skin well and put it on. I'll get. I think one of the big things actually is like making sure you've worn it in a little bit. Like there's just that little bit of like, you put it on fresh and you want to like get a bit of dexterity happening in your fingers, and just like, almost rub it on the rock a little bit just to get it a little bit more supple and ready to go. Uh, and then, yeah, you've probably get like 2 or 3 routes out of it. Obviously, it's going to depend on, for us in the Blue Mountains, it's quite coarse sandstone. So the crystals can really tear at it and dig in. And that can be a bit of a higher wear sort of thing. But if you're maybe just like pinch and lovely toofers in Greece or something like that, like it might last a week. Probably don't leave your tape on for a week. It's a bit gross. But yeah, you can definitely get enough out of it. And then, like, on a day where I have taped up a tip, like, if I want to do some extra routes at the end, like I might just do a bit less of a good job and just sort of slap a bit on there and just go, it's fine. I'm climbing 10 grades underneath my limit or 5 grades underneath my limit. I know this route. Like, I'm not going to worry too much if that digit isn't quite perfect. Totally fine.
Yeah, I'm just glad you put out a really comprehensive video on it because unless you have someone sit down and really show it to you, it's like years of trial and error. And to be honest, I just kind of avoided it. I don't know. I would just bleed or I would just give up. And although amazingly enough, I actually did send my hardest graded boulder with tape on my finger, but it wasn't super crucial. And it just shows you something about the mental state too, of just kind of accepting what it is and just going for it. So I don't know. I will link to the video because it's got to be one of the most comprehensive tape jobs ever shown. Uh, you you alluded to this earlier when we were talking about Groove Train, but it's closed, isn't it? You can't climb on Groove Train anymore. I've never been to Australia, although I've seen a lot of videos that got me frothing, and I am just wondering what the climbing status is down there. Like, if someone were to go take a trip, where should they go? As because it sounds like you've climbed well everywhere there.
Yeah, yeah, not quite everywhere. I still yet to head down to Tassie. Like some people might be familiar with the totem pole and the climbing down through Tassie. It's like quite adventurous, cool trad sort of stuff down there, and hard sport climbing and bouldering as well. Yeah, the Grampians. It's a complicated situation down there. There was kind of many. So the Grampians is probably like the spot in Australia. Like it is unbelievably awesome rock. It's world class sport climbing, trad climbing, bouldering. Like just insane. And it is a 40-minute drive from Mount Arapiles, which is where Punk's in the Gym and that sort of stuff is as well. It's like proper country Australia, and somehow there's world class climbing right there. Um, there, so the Grampians stuff. There was Aboriginal heritage sites there. There's rock art and those sorts of things, um, and areas of sort of cultural significance for the Indigenous people. And 100% climbers were like, okay, sweet, yep. Climbers weren't climbing on rock art. I'll have to, I will say that. Um, and there were areas where national parks had known that we'd been climbing for years, and suddenly they're like, "Oh, by the way, you're not meant to be there." And it was a whole political sort of thing, and there was a lot of different stuff going on. I'm not going to pretend to know all of the details, but I very much think climbers got thrown under the bus in that situation. Like we are, I would say, on the whole, a very conscientious user group for the outdoor spaces, and we're really looking after it all. But there's still a lot of climbing open down there. So half of Taipan Wall is open. I think I think you can still climb Serpentine, which is like touted as one of the best 29 8A routes in the world. I'm yet to climb that one. Um, Areas like the Citadel, which is where Amagama is, that's still open.
Woohoo!
Classic V13 Clemlosket boulder, like just insanely good. I climbed that the other year, and it was just one of those, like I cried on the top out. Like it was just one of those ones for me that is up there. Unfortunately, the Wheel of Life is closed.
Oof.
I was perhaps the last person or second last person to climb that route. Another one that I cried on the top out of. um, yeah, it's a bummer that area has been closed, because that's just an incredible feature. But the Blue Mountains, I think, which is where I live, like it's some of the best in the world. Like it's insane. We've had like Alex Megos come here, and he's keen to come back because he loves it so much. Jorge Diaz, or I don't know how to pronounce his name, the super strong Spaniard. He came here and was like, "Oh my gosh, how have I like not heard more about the Blue Mountains? This place is amazing." Ethan Pringle came here and was like, "Oh my gosh, how have I not heard more about the Blue Mountains? This place is amazing." So like, from my house, I can walk literally out my back door, through my backyard, into some of the best climbing in the world. Like it's right there. It's an hour and a half from Sydney. We've got all of the amenities. Like your coffee can still be hot that you bought in town as you walk into the cliff. Like it's so good. And to live here as a climber, like it's a small town, but there's enough amenities around to make it not feel like you're off in the middle of nowhere. And as I say, you can just pop down into Sydney, like, go and see a concert at the Opera House or whatever else. Um, it's awesome. And like where I grew up, southeast Queensland, around Brisbane, Frog Buttress might be an area that some people are familiar with. Incredible world class trad climbing there. And all around that area, there's Mount Coolum, awesome cave climbing, like just insane. There's a lot to do down in Australia. It is perhaps a little bit more spread out and not as dense as areas like Europe. But I think if you're coming from America, like you're kind of used to jumping in the car, and a 3-hour drive on the weekend or something like that isn't too much of an issue, really.
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough to beat the density of hard Spanish sport climbing. There's just crags every couple of feet. It feels like, uh, and this is probably a dumb question, but it's the the seasons are reversed, right? So in the summer in the northern hemisphere, like is it cold there right now? Is
Yeah.
basically what
So
I'm
I
asking. Can I leave and
woke
go
up
there
this
right
morning.
now?
Yeah, there's frost on our grass this morning.
Oh.
Yeah, it's
jealous.
cold. Like it doesn't quite get to the point of it does snow a little bit, but it's like when it snows, our whole town's like, "What? It's snowing!" and it barely settles. um, yeah,
Well,
so it's not quite like those massive dumps that you get, but yeah, it's like prime time this time of year,
okay.
and everyone's frothing.
That's good to know because I'm not even going to try to convert how hot it is here to Celsius because it doesn't matter. It's just too freaking hot, and I'm always kind of keeping my eye out for places to go to escape the heat because there's just not a ton in America, in North America at least in the summer. And yeah, I all those places that you mentioned, all those climbs. I mean, Amagam, I those are all just iconic test pieces that I've always wanted to go check out. So yeah, just cool to get a little insight into that world you grew up in because I don't know what to say. It's just not as front and center in the climbing world as maybe it should be. But every place has its time. I feel like I think every crag kind of hits the limelight. People are there, like Rocklands. Well, I don't know. Rocklands could have its limelight for quite a while because there's a lot of rock there. But they kind of go ebb and flow. So maybe someday the Blue Mountains.
Yeah, it's a pretty special spot, and yeah, for whatever reason, we just don't quite have um, the spotlight on us, which is kind of nice. Like it does get to feel like your own little space, but it is incredible. Like we've got incredible climbing, we've got incredible climbers. It's just yeah, it's awesome down
All right.
under.
Well, knowing that it's that close to Sydney is enticing too, because that makes it that much easier. But okay, well, I will come and visit. I swear at some point. In the meantime, Tom, despite you putting up many YouTubes, do you want to distill it into one pro tip for us?
Yeah, I sort of covered it a little bit before. It's I think that curiosity thing, like it's just approaching your climbing with curiosity, and that's not just down to like hard movements or whatever. It's just I think approaching life with curiosity. There's almost like a playfulness and an openness that you get to have with it, and it's not too. I'm going to contradict myself. It's not too serious. Like it's just yeah, curiosity. It's something that I try and strive for in life, and I think that it, you just continue to kind of realize how powerful it is.
So one of the ways that I've been able to keep an open mind and be I don't know if this is exactly being curious. It's almost like satisfying my curiosity is that I'm lucky enough to have many people around me who are much better climbers. And you're, up at the top, down under. How do you, how do you expand your horizons and stay curious when it's sometimes it's easy to go find the hard route that other people have done and that opens your mind and that it's still possible and you just have to like kind of be open-minded. Do you have any advice when you're kind of almost in your own little bubble because sometimes people may experience that at a much lower grade but maybe they're just in the middle of nowhere really.
Yeah, I think it's just tapping into just really enjoying climbing. And for me, I'm let's say lucky enough to feel like I really enjoy going out and finding new bits of climbing and discovering that as well. And so that for me is like I'm not I'm actually like I'm actually going through it at the moment and is trying to work out like what do I want to do with my climbing because I feel like I've got a lot of potential to climb really hard stuff, but I don't know if I want to see if I can climb a bunch of 37s like because that's a massive commitment, as a family person and all that, like, and I don't know that I would really enjoy the process. Like a big thing I've been thinking about recently is like this idea of regret. Like if I look back and think about regrets, it's like would I regret um having not climbed first round first minute? Maybe not. Would I regret like missing out on these things with my daughter? Yeah, probably, and it's like this kind of like balancing act. Um, so I think, in terms of like trying to find your own path through it all a little bit, it's like I think some of it is just working out some of those regrets, and also just like, it's not to say that I'm ready to stick my feet up. Like there's a lot of hard climbing that I'd love to do, and there's a lot of improvement that I'd love to do in my climbing, and it's enjoying the journey of it, and just going with your motivations. And for me, part of that is finding new stuff to climb, whether it's boulders or bolting multi pitches, bolting sport routes. Like that is really fun for me, and narrowing in on some of those smaller details. Like I really froth on board climbing, and there's projects on there that have felt as as special and awesome as like any of the big outdoor goals. And like you know on my previous board at the previous house, like it's gone, it's forever. Like no one will ever be able to climb that again, and no one tried it even. But it was my own little like fun journey, and that was awesome. And I think also like the special thing with it can feel a little bit lonely down here, but having those sort of online communities, like the tapping in with the Tension Board 2 crew, far out, that's fun. Like, and you can just kind of share little bits and pieces, and it feels a little bit less like you're on the outer, like you're kind of in this uh, community in a weird sort of way. Like it doesn't feel like it's as lonely sort of
Mm.
thing. So I don't know. It's just like I really enjoy climbing. If I was the only person left on the world, I would still be toiling away on my board. Like it's just I enjoy it. I would still go bouldering. I would still like try and work out how to make some sort of like massive crash pad so I can sport climb and all that sort of thing. I'd just rope solo everything. Like it's a thing that I really enjoy, and so yeah, it can be a little bit of a bummer sometimes to not have people to sort of share it with so much and really like dig into some of the like. I shouldn't say that I'm out ahead of everyone. Like there's definitely a lot of strong climbers here, and it can just be hard to line up timetables and that sort of thing. Like there's definitely people to go session with and all that sort of thing. But sometimes it can just feel like, as life goes through, there's less opportunities for everyone's timetables to align. So you can often just be there by yourself doing your own thing.
Yeah, that whole leaning on the board community is always good advice, and it makes me think of my pro tip. Not that I'm supposed to have one, but here's a pro tip for everyone who's really psyched on boards: climbing outdoors will make you better at board climbing.
Yes.
So,
It's amazing how much bigger holds can feel. Like when I've been climbing outdoors a bunch and I come back in like on the board or whatever, you're like, oh my God, it's like, this is good. And you bring those new skill sets in, and yeah,
I put more weight on my feet.
yep.
I automatically am like, I just, yeah, the holds feel better. The feet, I don't know if they feel better. They just feel like I'm actually weighting them. Yeah, I love it. I I can't believe we didn't cover this earlier, but we'll just do it at the end. Tom, I mentioned this at the beginning. You were a freaking Olympian. That's just amazing. I just think that's the coolest thing ever. I always say if I was ever going to get a tattoo, it would be the Olympic rings. I'm waiting for you to like stand up and like pull up your shirt and show me. But any thoughts on the Olympics are basically going on right now as we're recording. Not the climbing Olympics quite yet, but anything, any emotions it brings up or any memories that you can share with us?
Yeah, like so. Yeah, it was awesome to go. It was like being a sport mad kid. It was a dream come true to go to the Olympics and to represent Australia. I definitely did not feel like I showed everything that I had on the day, but that's the nature of competition. It's a one and done, and it hurt, but that's fine. You just like chin up next time. It's super cool to see it all going ahead this time. Like it's really different, just to watch the sports that are going on at the moment and see crowds there. Like that is special. to see people's families get to be there. Like that's pretty rad. I really, really am looking forward to watching the climbing. I I wasn't sure whether or not I would want to go for it this time, but I think just mentally I wasn't there. Like I just couldn't bring myself to drag through all of that again. If if it had happened in 2020, I think I would have had that like 1 year off and then could kind of like build up through it again. So there is a little bit of a like, bugger, it would be fun to be there again. But I was really congruent with the decision to not go. I'm super excited to watch everyone go for it. Like we were at the crag the other day and a mate and I were, just frothing on it. And you're like, oh, who do you think is going to be on the podium? And what do you think is going to be like this? And,
Who do you think is going to be on
those,
the podium, Tom?
yeah. So, I obviously for the women, it's like hard to go past Yanya. I think if I was to, bet with my head, I would say, probably Brooke would be there as well for me. I think that she, if she has some boulders that work for her, she's obviously incredible on lead. And then I would love to see Imori up on the like if she has a good bouldering round as well. She's obviously incredible on lead, and she's like I love her approach. It's crazy, and I think for the men, um, I reckon I would love to see Jakob up there. I would love to see Alex up there. And then I was thinking like one of the French dudes. I think probably Sam. I think, yeah, Sam Avizu. But it's also hard. Controversially, I've not put Adam in there. Um, don't know why.
I
But yeah,
want to see
it'll be
him
interesting. I'm
win.
probably completely wrong, except for Yanyu getting gold. It's going to be awesome though, because it's a flippin' stacked field. I think it'll be really cool. I think that, yeah, like from a Australian point of view, Osh has had a really great season. She's a massively improved climber than what she was at the last Olympics. Like it's really inspiring to see the work that she's put in and the level that she's gotten herself to. So I really believe that she can make finals. And it's like once you're in finals, like things can happen. Like you've just got to put yourself in that position. So I think that'll be really special to see. Um, yeah, it's going to be good. And I'm also backing the Kiwis in the New Zealanders in the speed. Julian especially is very quick.
I'm excited to see it all, and I I don't know why I want to see Adam do well or win. I just I even though I said this earlier how I used to not like his style of yelling or taking it so seriously. Now I actually feel the other way, and I feel like he really puts his all into it. Not I shouldn't. That doesn't take away anything from all those other climbers you mentioned. They're all putting their all in. But I just love his real, uh, real love of the sport, and I feel like
He
I'd
puts
like to
his
see him
heart on
win.
his sleeve.
Good way of
And I
putting it.
think that's a super inspiring thing. And like, I also think that that's like, it's a really, uh, something that people don't quite understand what it's like to be in the spotlight. Like, it is, it must be insane to be Adam and for him to be as open as he is with a lot of his shortcomings and failures and documenting that stuff. Like, it's pretty inspiring to see. Like, it's, yeah, it's cool. Not for everyone. Like, there's a lot of those competitors that play their cards close to their chest and don't show you what's going on. Like, Alex is always looking pretty cool for school. Jakob's the same. Like, there's a lot of people that it's just like, here is the A level version of what's going on in life. And um, Adam's pretty inspiring for like just putting it out there and just being open to it all. Uh,
Jakob does seem pretty
yeah.
darn cool. I've never met him, but he does seem pretty darn cool. And I was thinking about Adam Andro when he was young, and the internet was brutal, and they said he looked like Harry Potter. They had all these, and I just was trying to imagine what it'd be like to be a kid going through puberty, and people are tearing you apart and giving you crap. And the whole time he was nothing but positivity. He didn't really, complain about anything. He just kind of showed up with a smile and tried hard. And yeah, I don't know. I'm clearly a fan.
Yeah. No, I think he is one of the best advocates that we've got for our sport. Like he's an incredible person for all of that. And to, as you say, like he was such a nerd, such a dweeb. I remember the first time meeting him and just not knowing who he was and just seeing it was at World Youth Champs. And I went over there in, it was Ecuador 2007. I went over there and was like, this is like, fun. I've come second at nationals in Australia. Like, I could probably win World Youth Champs. Not quite. I wasn't thinking that. I was just, go over there and have some fun. But um, the first person that I meet outside of my Australian teammate that I was going to be competing against was this like dweeby looking kid wearing Mr. Bean socks and sandals and this like funny looking fedora that didn't really fit on his head and this kind of strange like Hawaiian button up shirt and cargo shorts uh, and glasses. And you're like, hi, like, I'm Tom. Um, and he's like, hi, yes, I'm Adam. It was like kind of that weird broken Czech English. And one of my teammates was like, "Oh yeah, that's Adam Andre. Yeah, he's climbed 36." And you're like, "Oh, I've climbed 24 at that point, and the first person I meet has climbed like literally more than 10 grades harder than me." And yeah, it was just like incredible to watch him climb back then. Like he had that same, uh, I almost want to say sloppy style, like it, but like very determined and very like, we all know the style that he climbs with, and it was that back then, but just with less muscle. And yeah, he's just, I think he's awesome. Like Chris Sharma was great for the sport, but he made it look too cool.
Yeah. Talk about taking it seriously. I feel like, just to go full circle to how we started, that Adam took it seriously, takes it seriously, and the one last thing I just would love to have some insight on in the Olympics is what it was just almost like logistically. Like you fly there, you get put up in a apartment. I mean, I know it was during COVID, but like what was that whole scene like? I'm just curious.
It's like another world. Like it's insane. It's one of those things where it's just like you've read about it. We've we're having meetings with the Australian team. They're showing us photos and all of this sort of stuff, and then you get in there and it's this strange bubble. Like it was really odd in the like coolest possible way. Like you come in, we've got our gear on this little golf buggy, we get driven up through the village and there's just apartment blocks everywhere. There's countries flags, there's people walking around with like the most extreme body shapes imaginable, and all of these people are the best in the world. Like, you see the basketballers, you see the power lifters, you see like it's just crazy. And yeah, like but there was, with COVID, the biggest stressor was obviously getting COVID. Like we had to do a spit saliva test thing every single morning that you woke up, and they would test it and see if you had COVID. And if you did, that was it. Like in quarantine, you're home. Like you're not competing. And it was so stressful to have to, you know, everything that had to go through to get there. And then boom, like it could just all go. And then yeah, it was crazy. But yeah, the food hall is massive. Like, and there's gold medals walking around. Like it was just it's another space. It's funny. I was listening yesterday to Careless Talk podcast with Molly Thompson Smith, and she's a climber. I love her. She's awesome. And she was saying, Sam, the co-host, asked, "Are you going to get the Olympic rings tattoos?" And she's like, "Oh, there's actually like a tattoo artist here. Like, yeah, I was thinking of getting it, and you can get it done here for free." And I was like, "Oh man, like bloody COVID, like." I haven't got the tattoo. I wouldn't be opposed to getting it. I just haven't gotten around to doing it. But yeah, that option wasn't there when we were there because of COVID. Obviously, you can't have tattoos going on. But that would have been pretty cool. So it was definitely no one will ever get to go to the COVID games. So that was far out. It's an odd thing to think back to that time, isn't it?
Dude, I mean, thanks for transporting me there. I just thinking of all the different body shapes is a really interesting thought where, yeah, it's literally the best the world can have in any sport. And that begets some wild, extreme body types that suit themselves for whatever the sport is. And yeah, dude, it's cool seeing you relive it. I wish that the COVID hadn't marred it a little bit, but at least you got something actually even more special. Like you said, hopefully it never happens again. I really hope it doesn't.
Yeah.
And yeah, dude, awesome, Tom. I just, yeah, thanks for taking me there. Thanks for taking me to Australia as well and taking us on that journey. And thanks again for putting out just great content, man. I like I said in the start, that's what really made me want to talk to you. I know you're unbelievably skilled, but the way that comes through in the content you make is what really got me. And I encourage you to keep doing it. And I encourage everyone listening to go and check out your YouTube, which is Tom O'Halloran at YouTube.
Yeah. Thanks heaps. It's really fun. It's like whenever these sorts of little, come on the podcast requests come through, it's exciting to just share a little bit more about Australia, basically. Like it's just not really there. And it's fun to just chat about it and just, every country, every different culture within climbing has got their own little approach and everything. And to just share a little bit of that with the world is super fun. And I definitely enjoy making the YouTube videos. I haven't made some for a couple of weeks now because it's just been a little bit busy with work and life and that sort of thing. But I've got like 3 or 4 of them on the final cut getting put together at the moment. So it's definitely more to come, and definitely keen to share more just tips and tricks and also the climbing projects that I've got going on at the moment. So yeah, it's really fun. So thanks for the opportunity to chat.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And yeah, I know it's a lot of work. I really actually do know it's a lot of work, but it's good for everyone. And like you were saying, in some ways it's just good for you. And so yeah, and thanks for sharing the kangaroo curry. I will use that sparingly, but I will add that to my vocabulary. And yeah, man, good luck on all the projects. And yeah, talk to you again soon.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like even more content, go to patreon.com/Testpiece. And while you're at it, share this podcast with someone you know who would love it. And please leave us a review or rating at wherever you get your podcasts. We've also got tons of great content on YouTube and Instagram, so don't forget to like and subscribe there. Okay, see you next week.